Hello, Dr. Edom here and welcome back. Now today's video is going to all be about what TOA guides don't show or tell you. They make raids look really easy, talking about the skull skipping trip, red X, butterfly skipping, etc. And I've found they seem to fail to mention how things were when they first started TOA, what they found hard, what they found easy, where it was they died, and basically a perspective of what a new player should be expecting when raiding. So I'm here to fill in the blanks. Now for the sake of this video, I'm going to assume that you have no purples from raids yet, so my setup for the most part is fairly basic: Hasta for the melee weapon, Trident for magic, and Boffer for range. And don't panic if you don't have a Boffer. My brother uses rune crossbows for all his raids and manages just fine. Other than that, whatever gear you have for three-way switch, Bandos, Scabaras, Mystic, Black D'hide, whatever you've got for today's run will be just fine. I'll be using Ancients and I promise I will be explaining in the video why that is. So as far as potions, grab some Star Brews, restores, Sandfew as well as a combat range potion and you're good to go. Invocations wise, we're going to do 150 raid, and for me personally, especially when I first started, I found these invocations the easiest to work with. So feel free to copy these on the screen if you wish. I promise 150 raid you won't get any easier. Now if you find anything I say today helpful at all or inspire you to start raiding, then please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you, and please smash that like and subscribe button. For you it's as easy as click, but really helps the channel out so much. Okay, so on guides I've watched, I've seen people tell you how to do this room in 35 seconds, etc. and you're done. Well, when you first start, that's much easier said than done, so what I would say is just take your time. What I didn't realise for a long time was I actually avoid any damage from the spikes only if you go on the marked blue tiles. Any others will cause you to get damage and lose water from the palm tree. Now bringing Ancients really does help here because you have time to look at when the acid falls, run across, run back and wait till the crocodile spawns, freeze and kill it, and then go back for the second water refill. I promise things will get easier, and as you get better you won't have to do this. But right now we aren't speedrunning this shit, we are trying to get things right and gain an understanding of how things work. So if it means taking a little longer, then that's okay. Now for Sebek himself, when you first enter the room, if you feel confident to lower his defense with a bone dagger or a Bandos godsword, brilliant. But if not, or you don't feel confident or you fear it's going to mess you up, then simply don't. You don't need to do that to kill this boss. Yes, it will be slightly slower, but that's okay. Now I would say pushing the boulders over the acid was the hardest thing to master when I first started, because it was easy to rush, click the jar, miss your target, then start panicking because you have nowhere to stand before he uses his raw attack. So either try and get another boulder far away, miss, die, etc. Or take your chances with the acid pool, spam click brews and pray you don't die that way. The best advice I can give anyone starting, and I know it's easier said than done, and that is try not to rush. You have more time than you think to move the jar over the acid. You can use your bow to smash it, and with a 6x6 radius you have far more space for target. But like all of this, practice really does make perfect. And I would say if it was a choice between making sure you get behind a boulder or switching your prayer for his standard attacks, boulders hands down every time. You can always take a couple of his normal hits on the chin if needed. As for the tidal wave attack, well, if you've done Dragon Slayer 2, then you most likely won't have an issue. And if you haven't, again, make sure you prioritize these over his standard hits and switching prayers, because these can do a lot of damage and throw you off if you get hit by them. Then you start panicking and this just goes south really quickly. Easiest part of Sebek, to be honest, is his final enrage phase, because all he does, other than the odd blood spawn, is use his normal attacks faster. So just flick prayers and you'll be fine. Okay, so next is the puzzle room before Kefri, and before starting this room, the biggest bit of advice I can give you is to download the TOA plugin. It solves all the puzzles in this room, which otherwise would be a complete bore. Once you've done this, this room becomes so simple. Slightly different with multiple people, but as a solo run, you only have to do 2 of the 4 puzzles, and the only annoying one is the one with the 6 pillars. Just because it's guesswork at which order you gotta hit them in, and every time you get it wrong, boulders fall from the ceiling, you can take damage, just best to avoid that one. Other than that, you're good to go, and this should be one of the simplest rooms for you to complete. Right, next room is going to be Kefri, and if you watch any guide, I'm sure they've explained the importance of order of completion, the first and last boss affecting the Warden phase. If you're not sure, leave a comment and I'll be happy to explain in detail. But short version, you want Sebek and Baba to be your first and last completion. Now, for me personally, Kefri is the easiest, or at least one of the easiest bosses to do, because you have more time to think about what is needed to be done. His normal attack is slow, you have a shadow on the floor, and it's easy enough to sidestep. I think the hardest part of Kefri is his poop management, knowing when and where to move before he throws his lines of poop. With the plug-in tiles that are marked, it makes it a little bit easier and nicer, but the biggest trouble I had was knowing when to run over to the squares. Of course, I can easily now see the swarm of flies buzzing around me, which indicates he's going to throw a poop. However, when I first started, I was focusing so much on getting the hits in, it was really easy to miss these flies, mess up the poop management, and suddenly find myself blocked in. Now, the little egg she lays weren't really in trouble. Destroy the one near you, then keep hitting Kefri till the others explode. I think the other thing that took me a while to grasp was the kamikaze bugs. Basically, you see a little shadow on the floor, then you've got to move quite quickly 1 square away, which on their own doesn't sound so bad, but when you're trying to kill other things as well, can be a little annoying, and they do hit fairly high. But this will get easier with practice. Now, dealing with the mage, melee and range scarab was, if you get your poop management correct, fine, okay. Otherwise, getting hit with a couple of them at the same time can be painful. But all I can suggest is always take down the major first, because of his AoE damage she can do, and it hits really high. But her normal hits are fine, so I wouldn't worry about protecting from magic. Now, if the melee scarab is up, always pray melee, then pray range, but always focus on hitting the major first, if that makes sense. I think a few goes and I got this room down fairly quickly. If anything, it's one of the 2 rooms I managed okay. Okay, so Akka is the next room, and yeah, not gonna lie, by far the hardest of all 4 rooms. Honest, I hate this boss with a passion, which is why we always have a smelling salts for this room, which act like a super combat potion with everything and restores your combat stats every 15 seconds, allowing you to use brews quickly. Now, before Akka, we have the puzzle room. And honestly, if you have the plugins, this room really isn't that bad and doesn't take long to master. Just make sure you avoid the black orbs and don't do what I often do and get hit by the big white beam when putting your mirrors up. With Dragon Pickaxe, this room can be done in 1 run, but when you first start, likelihood is it's going to take you 2 goes. And yeah, that's okay. Again, this isn't a speed run. Take your time, focus on not getting hit, and you'll do just fine. Okay, now I'm not gonna lie, other than the Wardens themselves, this room is the one you're gonna die most in. And yeah, as crappy as that sounds, it's the truth. This is the room that consistently damages you more than any others, even with prayer protections. This room involves the most switching of your gears and switching of your prayers, and this room takes longer than any others to do. For this reason, we always make sure we have our smelling salts to hand. So before you start, take a dose. Start with your mage gear because it's always the same when you first go in. Pray against melee and crack on. Now, this room above all others is the one where plugins are the most important. There's a few brilliant guys out there on YouTube that, will go into great detail about plugins, but the short of it is, download the plugin radius marker, which will put a nice coloured box around Akka, showing you which prayer to use. Red for melee, green for mage, blue for magic, and then you use the opposite to hit him. So Red to attack with mage, green you attack with melee, and blue you attack with range. Now, when someone first told me that, I was like, what? Eh? What the hell do I do? And it took me ages to get my head around it, and I would often forget which attack style I was using, even with the plugin. Best thing I can suggest is focus on your prayer. Just think red, pray melee, green, play range, blue, pray magic. As long as your protections, prayers are on point, you have more time to think about what gear you should be using to attack with. Otherwise, you're getting slapped a load of damage and spend your time just chugging brews and spam clicking trying not to get hit. So after getting all that right, you then have to make sure that when your shadows appear, you kill whichever one isn't see-through before you can do any damage to Akka, while making sure Akka is within the square that you killed the shadow to be able to do damage to him. Then you have to remember Simon Says phase, where you have to pay attention to which of the 4 squares light up in which order as to not get hit. For this reason, in the invocation section right at the start of the video, when everyone tells you to put on feeling special because it speeds up the run, we turned it off. Yes, it speeds up the run by making Simon Says faster. And when I first started, I needed all the time I could think, so having more time to think about what square I had to stand on was a massive help. Now, I know this sounds like a lot because honestly it is a lot to think about and does take time to learn. The best thing I can suggest is trying this room first a few times with the mentality of, okay, I'm not worried about completing the raid, but to learn the mechanics. Because what I found was, honestly, there's nothing more disheartening than getting through the first 2 rooms like Zibak and Kefri only to keep dying against Akka and wasting so much time and energy. Okay, and finally we come to Baba and the monkey room before him. Now, for me, the biggest thing that made this room easier was changing to Ancients. Hands down. Like many of you, I've watched guides and they say don't use Ancients, learn withdrawals, etc, etc. But honestly, when you're brand new to raids, you really want all the help you can get, you know, why wouldn't you? And then over time, as your skills develop, you can change things around. But anyone starting new, I would say use Ancients hands down. It really does help. So, as you can see, I've highlighted each of the monkeys in different colours to see what attack style they're using and what to hit them with myself. You don't have to do this, but for me, who's a visual learner, this just made things so much easier. Long story short, always focus on the green monkeys because they spit out venom first and the damage can stack up really quickly. Then the mages, then the rangers, and lastly the melees, all while dodging the volatile monkeys and repairing the vents and units. Now, I watched a guide or two a couple of times before going into this room, but honestly picked it up fairly quickly, especially when I changed from Thralls to Ancients, because with melee prayer on, I just left the shaman spawn his little monkeys, focused on the others that could do real damage to me, then had a nice stack of monkeys to heal from when my health got too low. Compared to the other 3 rooms, this is of course the hardest one to master and the easiest one to die in. However, compared to the bosses that we've already fought, this mini room shouldn't cause you too much trouble. Just watch out for the exploding monkeys, because if you're gonna die from anything, likelihood is it's gonna be them. Well, them and forgetting to repair the pillars and vents, which again can do like 35 to 40 damage, something like that, but other than them, you'll be fine. Okay, you'll be pleased to know, finally we're at Baba, the last of the pre-bosses, which at a low invocation like 150 is most likely the second easiest, maybe the easiest room to master, depending on the person. It's close between Baba and Kefri, although I do feel there is less mechanics with Baba, which is nice, although I think the few mechanics Baba does have are more punishing if you get wrong. So with Baba, when close up, make sure you protect melee at all times or you're gonna get slapped. He can still hit through prayer, but not so badly. His 2 attacks that you have to move away from are the boulders falling from the sky and his AoE explosion, both of which shadows drop on the floor beforehand, so just pay attention, move away, and you should be okay. But failing that, the damage taken isn't terrible, so don't panic. Now, the hardest mechanic the barber has, or should I say the one that does the most damage, is when he throws a boulder at you. This is the one that killed me the most, because I'd often be so focused on watching my health and the floor that I failed to notice I was miles away from the large stone boulder that you need to be standing next to not get slapped with 80 damage, and which would normally kill me in one hit. Best advice I can give, especially when you first start, is to make sure as soon as the boulder falls from the sky that you move over to one of the rocks placed on the floor and let Barber come over to you. That way you know you're safe when he does throw his large stone at you. The second thing I died most of when I first started was doing the boulder runs, where you have to hit the right one with range. Honestly, my eyesight isn't great, and when I first started I kept mucking up which boulder to hit, would get knocked back, start to panic, and yeah, things would just go south really quickly. Now I know there's lots of guys out there and you see people running through to the top of Barber, and yeah, when you get more confident, give it a try, but honestly, when you first start, just focus on hitting the right boulder and getting through. After a while, Barber stops and you can just go back to mealing him. The only other thing worth mentioning is the little monkeys he spawns. Right? They hit you with range and they can open sarcophaguses, which, you know, chuck out little bombs that explode you. Now, at a high invocation, these can be annoying, and if they're not killed, things can get out of hand really quickly. But at 150 invocation, I really wouldn't even bother hitting these. And by the time the rolling rock phase comes back, they get squished, and yeah, no more monkeys. Phew. Now, after all of that learning, that grinding, dying over and over to one of the other bosses, which you've just seen in this video, you've finally made it to the final boss, the Warden, which has 3 phases before the end. And yeah, you've guessed it, you're gonna die. Again. A lot. Phase 1 is easy enough. When dealing with the obelisk, watch a guide once or twice and you should have a pretty good understanding. As you can see, there's a couple of tiles marked to avoid the UFO phase, and unfortunately a lot of damage in this phase you just have to tank, but overall fairly simple to do. And if you've got a long range weapon like a Bofur, you haven't even got to move squares, you can just move to the side and you'll be fine. But overall fairly simple to do. The hard part comes in phase 2, and honestly I might get some stick for this, but personally for me, I found this the hardest part, harder than P3 Wardens, longer to learn, and that's because there's just so much to think about, so much you have to pay attention to, and if you don't, you die. So you gotta switch between range and magic to be able to hit him, as well as avoiding multiple mechanics including melee, range, and magic attacks that can turn off your prayer, as well as lasers that come across from the floor, bomb droppings from above. There is some brilliant guides out there, and the best advice I can suggest is to watch one of these over and over, and hopefully you'll find it helpful a few times, and just give it a go with the expectation of dying to begin with. Now, I promise this video isn't meant to put anyone off raiding, okay? I'm a huge advocate for new players starting, but what I'm trying to say is that it's okay to die and fail. Everyone starts the same, myself included, and I feel like, you know, oh my god, I'm never going to get this, but the more you do, the easier it gets, and I promise it will sink in eventually. What I don't want people to do is to watch these guides and think, oh, okay, they make it look simple. You give it a go, you die and think, okay, it must be me, I'm just no good at raids, because that isn't the case. It just takes time to learn. Whew. Okay, after P2 comes the final bit, and I'm sure at this point in the raid you're thinking, oh my god, I'm nearly there. Hell, I know I was. Now, you'll be pleased to know that there isn't as many mechanics in this phase as the last. And honestly, get a few kills under your belt and you will see that compared to P2, P3 really isn't that bad. Yes, you're still going to die a few times, and yes, there is new things to learn, but after a few attempts, you should start getting a hand on things. The hardest thing for me at this stage, and perhaps many of you will find the same thing, nerves. Right? Nerves is the biggest thing, the biggest factor, the biggest reason why you're gonna die. Okay, and yeah, it got to me loads. Because at this point, you're so close to the end, desperate to finish, and that's when you really start to panic and make silly mistakes, which you're gonna kick yourself for later. Right, and now I know I've said this time and time again, but I promise things will sink in eventually. There is a skull trick to do in this phase, but to start with, I honestly wouldn't bother. You have so much time to destroy the skulls when you're not doing the insanity invocation. Why make things harder for yourself? Grab a melee weapon, click, 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 and you're done. Plus, it does speed up the raid doing things this way. Now, when you've finally done the first part of the P3, he then goes into his rage phase. And this is the part where I would die the most. But again, I think it was more nerves than anything else. This did take a while to learn, but then suddenly things just seemed to click. I feel like looking back, that the most important bit of advice I can give is to just take your time and look where you're clicking. Now I know that's easier said than done, but like I think the best way to describe it is when you click and move to a new square, take a moment before going on to hit the warden. If you don't like the square you're on, or you look like you're going to get hit, move again. Because once you click to hit him, you can't move for a moment. And then that's when you're more likely to get hit, take damage, start panicking. But again, like everything in raids, practice is key. And remember, you always have your emergency ambrosias to use if you haven't already, to fully heal your hit points and your prayer. And there we go, that's the end of the kill. So let's see if we get anything good, and if you've made it this far into the video, I just want to say a huge thank you. Honestly, it means so much. I hope you've taken at least one thing away from this video, and again, please don't forget to like and comment and subscribe, it really does help. And as you can see, sadly no purple this drop, but we will keep grinding out, fingers crossed. And once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.